So I read a lot this month. This previous month has probably been my best reading month ever. I read 16 books this month, most of which were over 400, 500 pages. So let's just get started because I have a feeling this is going to be a long video. So I just want to briefly touch on these two books. I read these in the last week of December and I never touched on them in any of my recap videos for the end of the year because I had already made them. So Quicksilver by Callie Hart. I adore this book. It is so close to being a 5 stars. It's just not quite there yet. I imagine if I reread it, I would rate it 5 stars. But this book is about Saris, and she has grown up incredibly poor in an incredibly, rough world where water is essentially currency, and she gets into a bit of trouble that ends up leading her into this Fae realm where she actually has the ability to, save this war that's happening, and it's so good. There's a very brooding MMC in this. It was so good. I'm so excited for the next book to come out this year. 4.75, 4.99 stars basically. The only reason I didn't rate it 5 stars was because I felt that the beginning was a little slow, but I honestly think that that could just be attributed to the fact that I was getting to understand the world and it just felt slow because of that. So like I said, I would probably rate it 5 stars now. Then I read Heartless Hunter by Kristen Ciccarelli. This was a 5 stars. It is about Rune and Gideon, and Rune is secretly a witch in this world where they kill all witches, and she's been working really, really hard to free witches that end up being taken prisoner, and she ends up getting really close to a specific witch hunter to try to gain information. This witch hunter also happens to be her best friend's older brother. It was outstanding. Such an easy 5 stars. The final book in the duet comes out in February, so I'm so excited to finish this duology this month. Now, for the books we actually read in January. The first book I read this January was Wild Love by Elsie Silver. I honestly wouldn't know if I would classify this as a December or a January read because I literally finished it at 2 a.m. on January 1st. But this book is about Ford and Rosie, and Ford's just been named the world's hottest billionaire or something, and he's opening his own record studio, and Rosie is his best friend's little sister. And she ends up coming back to their small town in search of a job, and she ends up working for Ford. Meanwhile, they have both been infatuated with each other for forever since they were kids, and Ford also has a new daughter on the scene in this book. It was just so good, and I always eat up Elsie Silver's romances, so it was just really fun getting into a new world of hers. I rated it 4 stars. Okay. The next book I read was actually an ARC, so I don't have a copy of it, but it is A Fate Forged in Fire by Hazel McBride. This book comes out, I believe, in May, and oh my god, was this book outstanding. I don't know how much I can say about the book, but this book is about Amira, and it says it in the synopsis, so I feel like I can mention it. It says that she, has to claim her throne and her birthright, but there is an incredibly oppressive, sexist religion that's trying to take over what was formerly a matriarchy society because of their magic and goddesses and all this kind of stuff, and there are dragons and enemies to lovers, and oh my gosh, it was so good. This was, I honestly think, the fastest paced book I've ever read in my entire life. The only reason I'm not rating it 5 stars is because for me personally, I felt like the first half of the book was just a little bit too fast-paced for my liking, but after that it was, oh my god, it was so good. The romance is so good, the magic, the dragons, I loved everything about this book, and I honestly cannot recommend you get this book more than I already clearly have. But yeah, it was a great read. I think it comes out in May. Next book I read was Funny Story by Emily Henry. I feel like I was the last person to hop on this bandwagon, but this book is about Miles and Daphne, and they have both found themselves in a very tricky predicament where they have both been left by their respective partners because their partners left them for each other. So they end up living together because Daphne really needs a place to live after her ex was like, hey, get your out of here, pretty much. And they end up kind of fake dating, and it was just so good, and I can absolutely see the comparison people make of Miles to Nick Miller from New Girl. I absolutely see it. It made this book so much more enjoyable having that like visual in my head. But I loved this. It was just another Emily Henry classic for me, and I think I would rate it like 4 stars. The next book I read was A Broken Blade by Melissa Blair. This is the first book in the Halfling saga. This book was so good. I didn't love it as much as I thought it was going to, but it was still a very, very good book. This book is about Kira, and she works for the king because she is a halfling, which means she is half elf and half human. And she is like the head of the military. She is basically she's the king's blade. I don't know how else to explain it. She will kill anyone he says to, and this definitely takes a toll on her because there's no jury, no judge, just her and the king's orders pretty much. And something's happening around the kingdom where someone called the Shadow is really undermining the king, and her search for this person takes her into the Fae realm, and things get so interesting. I'm wildly excited to see where the series goes from here, and the second book in this series is on my TBR for this upcoming month, so stay tuned. The next book I read this month was Bride by Ali Hazelwood. I was really loving this, and I honestly thought that it was going to be a 5 stars for me, but then there was kind of like a weird aspect of a spicy scene that kind of like threw me off a little bit. So I'm gonna have to rate it 4 stars, but this is about a vampire and a werewolf that get married, and it's kind of to unify the two societies so that like war doesn't break out. And there are aspects of mates in this book. The politics going on within this were so interesting, and I actually loved it. I loved everything about it except that one thing that was a little weird for me, but I did really like the story as a whole. And then the next book I read, we're going to touch on very briefly, and then I'm going to speak about it again later. So all I'm going to say is the next book I read is The Blood of Hercules, and I rated it 6 stars, and we're going to talk about it again in a second, okay? The next book I read after that was Wild Eyes by Elsie Silver. I really liked this. I think my favorite part about this story, honestly, was Ollie, who is the child of the dad in this romance. And I just absolutely adored Ollie. I think his character was so beautiful, and everything he represented, it was just a beautiful character. And the romance, however, is about Weston and Skylar. And Skylar is a famous musical artist coming to record at Ford's new recording studio that was created in Wild Love, and West is his best friend. But it is just such a good romance, and I really liked how they touched on like loneliness in adulthood, and again, just Ollie's entire character meant so much to me, and I think I would rate this like 4.5 stars. Okay, And then after I read Wild Eyes, I read Blood of Hercules again. Okay, time to talk about this book. So, as you clearly just heard me say, I read this book twice this month. Not just this month though, I read it twice in like 3 days. I loved this book so much. This book is about Alexis, and she has grown up in a world where gods are ever present and titans are like destroying the universe, and there are specific gods that are called chthonics, which are gods that have powers that like cause pain. So like Hades, Achilles, Artemis, and they are sent to fight titans, just as background. But Alexis has grown up really in a horrible situation. She's grown up homeless for most of her life with her younger brother. And then when she's 19, she finds out she is actually a Spartan and is enrolled in the Crucible, which is an intense school academy basically for Spartans. And her mentors are Patro and Achilles, and they hate her because she is an Olympian, I think, and not a chthonic. And those sides have basically always hated each other. But they do have to help her throughout this school. And this school is intense as all get out. You do not sleep, you do not eat, you do not bathe for 2 weeks straight. Then you come home to your mentor's house for 3 days, then you go back and do it again for months on end. And then she has other chthonic professors, Augustus and Charon, I believe it's pronounced, who really have a fascination with her, and we get to see their points of view during some parts, and it is such, it's such an extraordinary book. I honestly do not know how to emphasize this enough. I literally ate up this entire book. We have sentient creatures and powers. It was just, oh my god, it was so good. It was so good. It was so good. I don't want to give anything away, but like absolutely ate up this book, and I cannot wait for the next book in the series to come out in, I think, October. But yeah, absolutely incredible. The next book I read, I actually listened to this. It was Caraval by Stephanie Garber. This book really let me down, I'm not gonna lie. I was expecting so much more, given how much I loved the Once Upon a Broken Heart series, but I really just found most of the characters in this very, very unlikable. Like, Donatella, Scarlet's sister, did not like her at all. And didn't like Legend at all. I really just hated a majority of the characters. The only reason I was kind of interested in the story was because I wanted to see how Scarlet's romance would unfold. But the premise of this book is that Scarlet and her younger sister are invited to this year's Caraval, and she really wants to go, but there are a lot of things inhibiting her from being able to go. She ends up going, obviously, and her younger sister, Donatella, is actually at the center of it, and she has to find Donatella before Caraval is over. It's a whole thing, but I, like, hated Donatella. I'm not even gonna lie. I'm happy Scarlet got a happy ending, though. I did think this entire series, though, was going to be about Scarlet and not Donatella, so I honestly don't even know if I'm gonna finish this series. But I would rate this book like 3 stars. It was fine. I didn't really like it, though. The next 2 books I'm going to have to mention together because it was a tandem read. And that was Zodiac Academy, The Awakening, and The Awakening is Told by the Boys, which I'll insert a picture of the cover for here. I cannot rate this book on its own because of the tandem read, I feel like. Because I truly think that if I were to have read this by itself, I honestly might not have even continued the series. I probably would have hated the heirs so much more than I did. I mean, I still hated them, don't get me wrong, but I had much more understanding of their motives, kind of, because I read As Told by the Boys. in tandem with this, and I ate this shit up. I read both of these books. I did the entire tandem read in a day, which is like 1,000 pages in a day. Just absorb that for a second. I ate it up. I'm not even gonna lie. It was so good. And then I immediately started reading the second book in the series, Ruthless Fae, which I didn't finish till later in the month for certain reasons, so I'll get into that later. But again, I have to rate them together for a total of like 4.5, because it would have been intolerable to read about the heirs had I not gotten their perspectives otherwise. They would have just seemed like absolutely horrible piece of trash human beings had I not done the tandem read. And I know it's not recommended to read that book in the beginning because they say it gives stuff away. I didn't really feel like it gave anything away except background into why the characters are the way that they are, which I feel like kind of matters. But yeah, it was really good, and I'm definitely going to be continuing this series. The next book I read was Manoia Park's Into the Dark. I absolutely rated this 5 stars. I knew going into it I was going to rate it 5 stars. This book hit so hard. I sobbed my eyes out so many times. I cannot describe to anyone how much this series means to me. This was the perfect conclusion to the Manoia Parks side of the series, in my opinion, and it was honestly beautiful to see Magnolia's journey through a specific journey I can't mention because it'll spoil something. The Magnolia-Julian confrontation happened, sobbed my eyes out. There were also a lot of parental things that happened in this book that I loved. I mean, I felt like it had to happen, but it was just such a good book and I absolutely rated it 5 stars. The next book was actually a DNF, unfortunately, and that is Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. I had such high expectations for this book. And I was really enjoying it when I started it, but I accidentally spoiled the ending for myself, and it made me so mad. Like, what do you mean that is the end? That's the end? After all of that happens? It just pissed me off so much that I knew I wouldn't even want to read it, because like, what do you mean I have to go through all of that just for that to happen? I don't care. It was so stupid to me, and that seems so mean, but no, nope, not for me. Not for me at all. It pissed me off. And then I'm actually so excited to be talking about this. I read Assassin's Blade by Sarah J. Maas. This took me a while to like fully get through because it's actually a collection of novellas, which I didn't know going into this, but I feel like it gave such important history into the beginning of the series. Also, the rage I felt when I finished this book was unlike anything I have ever experienced in my entire life. Oh my gosh, I got so mad. I got so mad. And if you have read this book, I just want to say one thing. One thing. The sheet music. Oh my god. It meant that moment meant so much to me. I don't even know how to explain it. But I'm gonna rate this 4 stars. I'm so excited to read Throne of Glass and hopefully a couple more books in the series this upcoming month. And I don't know if I mentioned it, but I would rate this 4 stars. It was so good. It was so good. Oh my gosh. The second to last book we have to talk about is also a DNF, which I'm not going to show the book until I say this. I honestly don't think it's any bearing on the actual book itself that I am DNFing this. The reason I am DNFing this is because it is super triggering to me. The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. I got like 50% of the way through this and I had to DNF it. I knew what this was about. Like, I knew going into it. I don't know if there are trigger warnings in the front. There are not. This book is about Lenny and her parents in the 1970s to 80s, and her father served in Vietnam and was a POW. He ended up coming back. Obviously, anyone would have PTSD after that, and it really affects him and how he behaves and how he treats his wife and his child. And he ends up relocating them to Alaska, and there are some really good aspects of like the town coming together for them and helping them through the Alaskan winters and just like rallying behind them. But then there's also an aspect of kind of extremism that her father goes into, and he's an alcoholic, he's abusive, and the mom just kind of puts up with it and excuses it. And this elicited emotions and feelings about my childhood that I didn't even know I had. And I'm personally not ready to confront those. So I had to put the book down because it was really bothering me. And I was thinking about it the other day because I literally DNF'd this yesterday, or this morning technically. Like, I decided I wasn't going to go back to it, where I was like, I'm 50% of the way, I may as well just like stomach through it. But like, that's not what reading's about at all. I'm not gonna stomach through a book to finish it, especially if it's making me this upset. So I decided I wasn't gonna finish it, and that's kind of disappointing for me just because I was really looking forward to reading my first Kristen Hanna book, and I did get through a good portion of it, but I can't finish it. But I will definitely still be trying to read some of her other works. And then the last book I read, I don't physically have the copy of, but it is Zodiac Academy, Ruthless Fae. I just finished this today. It's actually the 30th as I'm filming this. And I don't think I'll read The Reckoning within a day and a half, but you never know.
Hey guys, I'm editing right now, and I just wanted to come on here to say I did in fact read The Reckoning in a day and a half. I stayed up till like 1 in the morning reading, and then I finished it this morning. I loved it. The ending was incredible. 4 stars. Back to the video.
This book was so good. It just picked up right where the first book left off. I loved it. We definitely got to see more of the magic. The romances are developing a little bit more, and I really loved the ending and the implications it had. So I'm so excited to continue this series, and I think I'd rate it like 4.5 stars. Those are all the books I read this month. I'm literally still so proud of myself for everything I read this month. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you stayed this far into the video, I cannot thank you enough. I appreciate each and every one of your beautiful faces. I hope you guys are all having an absolutely incredible morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the world, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!